Hey everyone, it's Blake. Welcome in to episode number 14 of our WWF Invasion 2001 save. In TEW9, this is Raw is War for June 4th, 2001. As I mentioned, if you guys missed the community post or you didn't watch the Choosing My Next TEW9 series video, we had the save get corrupted on this WWF Invasion save. And so luckily, I've always told you in my saves, I always make multiple backups because I just know this happens sometimes. And so, luckily, my most recent backup was actually 2 shows before this one. So I just had to go back, book those shows again, watching my own videos to get the results because I couldn't exactly remember some of the things. But so I did that, and now we're kind of caught up again where I was able to catch up, finally book this episode, and get this going for you guys. So let's jump in. This is, as usual, a pretty noteworthy edition of Raw is War, as we have kind of escalated things a bit, as you know, since Judgment Day, where that was the official kickstart of the invasion, as Booker T and DDP made their appearances there, and now we get the fallout from SmackDown. And we start off with a segment of a 92 rating. And it is the same sort of visual we started SmackDown with, where it was Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince McMahon sitting in the back, sort of staring into space. And it was all about trust, because Steve Austin wasn't sure if he could still trust Vince McMahon based on some of the things Vince had done and not really filled Austin in on what was going on. That was Big Show interfering in Judgment Day in the championship match between Austin and Taker. And then there were some other little things that had started to sort of irk Austin a little bit about how Vince was withholding some things from him. So we get the same visual here, except we start off, camera pans into Austin and Vince, but then there's Kurt Angle. And we just see Kurt Angle shaking his head. Austin and Vince are looking at him. Angle's just shaking his head. And he just says, guys, trust. It's all about trust. Why did you not tell me about what was going on with Eric Bischoff? That was my good friend, Angle says. And I am shocked that he would do such a thing. I still can't believe it, Angle says. And then Austin looks at him and says, Kurt, believe it. Eric Bischoff is nothing but a mealy-mouthed bastard and a piece of trash, as Austin calls him. And Angle just says, Steve, I can't believe it. Eric was my friend. He talked about how much he liked my gold medals and all of this. Angle just, Kurt Angle, right? And so Vince just says, Kurt, it's not a matter of trust. We had to go into that knowing that that was the best decision for business. That was the best way that Steve and I needed to handle that situation. And yes, I know that you were close with Eric Bischoff, but once again, Eric Bischoff shows his true colors and shows that there was a reason that I crushed Eric Bischoff and WCW. And that's because no matter what anyone tries to do, I will always win, Vince says. I will always be the person who outsmarts everyone at every turn. And we knew that Eric Bischoff was the person who was pulling the strings and not allowing us to get closer and closer to our ultimate goal of not just taking out WCW, but taking out The Undertaker, Kane, Chris Jericho, all these people that have been a thorn in our side. Our plan now continues, Vince says, and it's going to continue here tonight. And so Angle still shaking his head. Austin just looking over, shaking his head at Angle. And so, again, Angle's struggling a little bit with this Eric Bischoff thing. Bischoff, in charge of the security breach, is what Vince told us on SmackDown. So, as these guys are talking, here comes William Regal. Now, if you remember, William Regal was given the night off last time around because Vince told Regal he wanted him to go back and think about things. He wanted our commissioner, our esteemed commissioner of the WWF, to go back and think about some things because he had not been able to get the job done when it came to this whole situation with Jericho, with Taker, Kane, and we know Regal lost in the first round of the King of the Ring to Jeff Hardy. And so Vince gave him the night off, wanted him to come back with something to prove. And so Regal walks in, Vince says, well, Mr. Regal, I gave you the opportunity. I said if you came back here and you wanted to keep your job, you have to prove yourself. And so, of course, that was the whole theme for Kurt Angle, right? Angle kind of started into this thing, wanted to prove himself to Vince. So Vince wants Regal to prove himself now. And so this gets an 82. And Regal just says, Mr. McMahon, I apologize for everything that I have done. And Regal says, but I have a solution that I think you're going to like. And that's when Regal says, I know I was unable to beat Jeff Hardy. And Regal just kind of, you can tell, just saying those words is really pissing off Regal for having to say this. But I also know that there is someone who will beat Jeff Hardy. And he says, and that is Kurt. Because Kurt is an Olympic gold medalist. And if you want to solve some of your problems, Kurt winning the King of the Ring will be one of them. But I also believe that Kurt can solve another problem. And that is when Regal says, the Big Show could not on SmackDown. But Regal says, as your commissioner, I am going to make a match tonight in the main event of Raw is War. Kurt Angle will challenge Kane for the Intercontinental Championship. And so, Angle's he's still frustrated about this Bischoff thing, but all of a sudden, Angle's eyes light up, right? And then Angle starts looking around. He looks at Austin, who on one shoulder has got the WWF Championship belt. On the other shoulder, he's got the Tag Team Championship belt. Angle looks at his shoulder, where he's got one half of the Tag Team Championship belts, and then he's looking at the other one, and there's nothing on there. And Angle's just lighting up with the possibility here, and then Austin just looks at Angle and still just shaking his head, and, Austin just, how Austin is with Angle. And so Vince looks around, and Vince looks back at Regal and says, Mr. Regal, I think that's a great idea. And so that is kind of your setup. So it is going to be in our main event tonight, Kurt Angle versus Kane for the Intercontinental Championship. It's on the line, and so Regal has come back seemingly with something to prove here and is making a huge match right off the bat, Angle and Kane for the Intercontinental title. 82 for this one. All right, King of the Ring rolls on, and we got actually a really good match here to start things off. Edge versus Raven in the qualifiers. And remember, last week it was sort of like Angle had assumed that Edge had already advanced, and of course that was just a high confidence level, and they all were very confident. Well, it turns out maybe this is why. Edge gets the win over Raven, 647, with the pin after the implant DDT. And what happens? Well, we're kind of playing up the story here. Remember, Jericho, just last gasp effort, was able to beat Rhino in that King of the Ring qualifier. And so the whole story here is that Rhino comes out, and you want to talk about a Rhino? This guy is performing like a Rhino here because he just comes out and is just absolutely on a mission. So we see a very angry Rhino come out, and, you get kind of the interference here. Rhino hits the gore on Raven, and that's kind of your story here for Edge to get the win and advance now in the King of the Ring. I promise I will give you guys the full updated bracket after the last King of the Ring qualifier, which is tonight on Raw. And so I will give you that. I forgot last time around, but I'll give you the updated brackets so you know where things stand. So, again, the story here, Edge advances to the King of the Ring quarterfinals, but also Rhino on a tear here with this. So 71. And so we go to commercial, and we're back from commercial, and it's Edge, Christian and Rhino. They've come back after the big win over Raven, and it's Kurt Angle who meets them. And so this gets a 75. Good stuff. A lot of good ideas here on this. So Angle congratulates Edge, and these guys are celebrating, they're cheering. Rhino's not really part of this because Rhino's still just kind of, the guy is just fuming. Again, based on the idea that he lost to Chris Jericho last time around. And so Edge, Christian, Angle, they're all just celebrating, they're hugging, high fives everywhere, and Angle just congratulates Edge, and these guys, again, are as happy as can be, right? And that's when Edge just says, Kurt, listen, we try to follow your lead. You are the best, and I know that you're going to get the opportunity tonight to face Kane for the Intercontinental Championship. And Angle just says, yeah, I want to talk to you guys about that, actually. And Edge just says, absolutely, Kurt. We're going to celebrate for a few minutes, and I'd like to talk to you about your match. But there's one thing I'd like to ask you first. And so Christian kind of leans in. He wants to know what Edge wants to ask Kurt Angle. And, Angle's like, well, what is it, Edge? What would you like to ask me? And Edge just says, Kurt, I was thinking about what Christian said last week. And he mentioned that, look, you're an Olympic gold medalist. You're one half of the WWF Tag Team Champions. You may be the Intercontinental Champion after tonight, Edge says. So, I want to ask you a question. What would you think if I won the King of the Ring? And so all of a sudden, we're back to where we started. Christian on SmackDown asked Angle if he thought he could win the King of the Ring. Now Edge is asking Angle if he can win the King of the Ring, and Angle's just sitting here like, come on, guys. Like, we got more important stuff to focus on. I got an Intercontinental Championship match tonight against Kane. And Angle just keeps looking over to the side, and he's seeing Rhino over there just fuming still. And so Edge and Christian, kind of trying to add a little comedic touch here, wanting Angle to let them win King of the Ring. But Angle's not having it just yet, and he says that he wants to talk about this match tonight because he may need a favor, as he says, from Edge and Christian. So that's kind of your setup there for that. 75, Edge advances and wants Angle to let him win King of the Ring, just like Christian did. All right, speaking of King of the Ring, Edge now knows who he will face in the quarterfinals because it is Rikishi getting the win over Hardcore Holly, 638 here with, of course, the Bonsai drop. And then a little bit more. Come on, this is the Attitude Era. You guys, we got interference in almost every match. So we're trying to stick to the times here. But it is Crash Holly coming back out to distract Hardcore Holly. Remember, we've had between these two, the initial turn, all that other stuff with Hardcore turning on Crash. And now, last time around, it was Hardcore being involved in Crash not qualifying. Crash returns the favor, and so he kind of plays a role here. Not a huge role. Again, we're just going to kind of go with the idea it's a distraction, not a full-on interference finish here, because, quite frankly, like Rikishi is probably okay and doesn't need interference. So Rikishi gets the win, though, 64. I mean, fine match. I have no issues with this. So, yeah, we'll take that. And so Rikishi advances, and he will face Edge now in the King of the Ring quarterfinals. All right, now we're back in the back. Of course, Angle is out celebrating with Edge and Christian, and it is Austin and Vince. And they are just, continuing to sort of sit there, and you can tell that this is a much more kind of cohesive unit. Remember, before, Austin was kind of questioning the trust and all that, but I think, seemingly, when we see Austin here, after everything that happened with Bischoff, he has a little bit more trust that Vince let him in on what was going on, because it was Austin delivering the stunner to Bischoff and just destroying the former WCW president in the middle of the ring. And so these two are talking here, and then they stand up because they see who has arrived, and it is the Big Show. And that is where Austin stands up, and of course he's still giving Big Show the eye, based on the fact that he's made it very clear he wanted Show to have nothing to do with his win over The Undertaker at Judgment Day. That didn't happen. Seemingly Vince called on Show for yet another favor. And so that is where things stand. But also standing are Vince and Austin. And Vince just gets up in Big Show's face and he just starts going off on him, talking about how once again Big Show couldn't get the job done. And so, which, is total Vince here, manipulation, because we know Big Show has gotten the job done for Vince and Austin, as we saw at Judgment Day. And so Vince is just yelling at Show. Austin's just kind of standing there. And then Big Show, still kind of his stoic way here, has nothing to say. And then Vince just says, "Why don't you say something, damn it?" And then Vince just hauls off and slaps the Big Show right in the face. And you can tell this is where Show starts to bow up a little bit to Vince McMahon. But Austin gets between and gets in, Big Show's face. And we've got Austin and Big Show face to face here. Things are about to go down, it seems. But then Vince just moves Austin out of the way and says, "Steve, he would never put his hands on me." And he says, "Here's what I want you to do. I want you to do the same thing I told Mr. Regal to do last week. You go away for a little bit. And when you come back, you better have something to prove, and you better have something that's going to make me happy," Vince says. And so Big Show's ready just to go off on both of them. But he thinks better of it, and he walks out, and Vince is just pissed off here, and Austin still just giving Big Show a stare. So 87 here for this one. Yeah, just continues to get more interesting there. All right, now it's Michael Cole with Eddie Guerrero, and still, as usual, we're getting the penalties from the personal issues with Eddie. 58 here for the segment. It's in that range all the time now, seemingly, with Eddie. But so Eddie is ranting about the Hardy Boys. Michael Cole's questioning him, saying, Eddie, you said last week you were just there to watch Billy Gunn. You tried to interfere in Matt Hardy's match and all this other stuff. And we know it was the Hardys who ran off Eddie, which actually kept him away from Billy Gunn's match against the Good Father. And so Eddie's just ranting about the Hardys, and Cole's just saying, well, Eddie, people are just saying, you pretty much have to cheat your way to anything right now. And Eddie just says, I don't have to cheat to beat anyone. And so that's kind of your theme here, is that Eddie's saying he doesn't have to cheat to beat anyone at all. So 58 here for this one. And of course, what does that mean? Well, in another King of the Ring qualifier, Eddie Guerrero gets the win in 7:23. I don't like the submission here. We'll go pinfall after blatantly cheating. So you guys can tell the story we're telling with Eddie is that you just cannot believe anything this guy says, because Eddie will lie, cheat, and steal his way to whatever he wants. And so we're kind of playing that up here with Eddie. So we did do storytelling for this one, so took it down a little bit in terms of probably the number, but 65, I'm fine with that. Again, everything with Eddie is just going to be penalized a little bit just because of the personal issues thing. But I said we could just completely remove him from the storylines, but I just don't want to do that. And obviously we're not putting him like in a full-on main event just yet. So it is kind of something where, I don't necessarily mind this. So, all right. So Eddie cheats again, and that again is sort of your story here with Eddie, who has advanced to the King of the Ring quarterfinals. All right, so now that we do know that Eddie Guerrero has advanced, I will give you the updated King of the Ring bracket. And so here is a look at the quarterfinals, and this is what it's going to be. And we will get started, actually, with the King of the Ring, not on SmackDown, but next week on Raw is War, is where we will get multiple quarterfinal matches. We'll announce those on SmackDown. So these guys get a little bit of a break on SmackDown, and then we get to the quarterfinals, and then, of course, the semifinals and finals will take place at the King of the Ring pay-per-view here in several weeks. So here is your bracket. It is Kurt Angle versus Jeff Hardy. It is Chris Jericho versus Eddie Guerrero. That's a pretty stacked top part of the bracket there. Then you've got Edge against Rikishi, and you've got Matt Hardy against Christian. So lots of interesting possibilities if you want to do your pick'em contest for this particular quarterfinal. Yes, lots of interesting semifinal possibilities and, of course, final possibilities when it comes to this King of the Ring. I kind of like the way this has come together, and I think that you guys should be pretty intrigued by the directions we can go here, because I wanted to set it up where you can kind of clearly look at the bracket and be like, okay, there are multiple ways you can go here with some of these potential matches. So, so there's a lot potentially how this could unfold here with this King of the Ring. So there you go. There's the updated bracket. Quarterfinals get underway next week on Raw is War. All right. Speaking of that, we get kind of a video promo here from Chris Jericho. So Jericho is not in the building, 73 here for this one, and it is Jericho just saying, I'm not stupid, right? I'm not coming to the building because I know I'm not 100%. And if I come to the building, I never know. Is it going to be Big Show? Is it going to be Rhino? Is it going to be someone else? Jericho says. And so you kind of get a video that's sent in here from Jericho, and, also we're kind of playing this up as though, hey, we've kind of gone to an interview with Jericho, and he's kind of playing up all the different possibilities, right? He now knows he's going to face Eddie in the King of the Ring. And so Jericho basically just playing, sort of the valiant babyface here, where he's clearly not 100%, but his goal is still the same, of winning the King of the Ring. And so kind of just a promo here, Jericho trying to, stay away and not get gored or chokeslammed by anyone, because clearly the last gasp effort is what helped him beat Rhino, because Rhino was kind of controlling the match. So that's kind of our story here for this one, 73 for Jericho, who is not in the building, but who is still in the building, is, of course, Steve Austin and Vince McMahon. 87 here for this segment. And so in this one, we have Austin, Vince and Regal. And, again, Angle is still kind of, getting ready for his match and all this other stuff. And that's kind of the story we're playing. Angle's getting ready for this big match against Kane. And you just kind of have everyone still just kind of sitting there talking. And, Vince just says, Mr. Regal, what a great idea you had there to have Kurt challenge Kane for the Intercontinental Championship. and I guarantee you we can come up with a plan to make sure that Kurt walks out with that title. And that's where Austin just kind of looks over at Vince. And he says, what's that plan, Vince? Do you think that Kurt Angle needs some help to win the match? Is that what you think? Because you thought I needed help to win my match against The Undertaker at Judgment Day. And so even with the trust kind of rebuilt here, Austin cannot let this go that Vince did not think that Austin could beat Taker one-on-one because he had to enlist help from the Big Show. And so, Vince is just like, Steve, we've been over this time and time again. Just, you have to trust me, okay? Remember, this is all about trust. And so you just have to trust me. I told you you could trust me last week, and look what we did. We got rid of the person that probably you and I have hated the most throughout the years, and that is Eric Bischoff. We got rid of him, Steve. And so he says, you just have to trust me, and let's let it go. Do I think Angle needs help in his match? I'll answer it this way, Steve. I think we need to do whatever we have to do to make sure that Kurt walks out with the Intercontinental Championship. Do I think you, Steve, need help in any of your matches? Of course I don't. I am just doing what I think is best for all of us. And so, again, Austin just kind of stuck on this idea still that does he think Kurt needs help? And Austin just says, okay, I understand. So 87 here for this segment. All right, then we get a tag team match here. The Dudley Boys defeats the Good Father and Bull Buchanan. So 6:43, the Dudley Death Drop does it there. So not a bad match, 64. Always nice to get the chemistry notes and everything there. I think this is one of maybe the only rematch I've had so far. These two actually did have a tag team match like a month ago, one of our second show, maybe third show, whatever it was. So I don't do many rematches, as you guys know, throughout my series. I kind of like to just find different combinations, but sometimes you got to do it, especially probably when it comes to the women's division, more so than anything. But anyways, Dudleys get the win. And so afterwards, we're kind of playing up the story that, all right, the Dudleys just got to win, but yet they don't look very happy. And so Coach kind of comes out as they're walking up the ramp, and Coach is trying to figure out, why are you guys upset? You just won the match. And the Dudleys just say, you know what? We're tired of this. We're tired of waiting. We're tired of watching Steve Austin, Kurt Angle walk around with no care at all for the tag team championships. They're not a real tag team, Bubba says. We are. We're one of the best tag teams in the history of professional wrestling, and we're tired of watching them not do anything with these tag team titles, and we're going to do something about it, is what Bubba says. So Bubba and Devon just storm off here, clearly on a mission, because as we've said, they have kind of taken aim at Austin and Angle here with the tag team championships. 48 for this segment. All right, speaking of the women's division, it's still not where we want it to be just yet. And so we have a match here, non-title. Chyna gets the win over Terry. 2:38, the powerbomb does it. We brought the crowd down. We gave the crowd a breather. It worked for that regard, I guess. 44, not really the story here. The bigger story is that, all right, after the match, 43, we did cool the crowd a little bit with this one. I'm not surprised. I just sort of expect that. But it is Jazz coming back out. She's going to taunt Chyna. Remember, last week on SmackDown, it was Chyna making the save for Trish in that scenario. But this time around, it's Lita making her return after Jazz attacks both Trish and Lita in that number one contenders match at Judgment Day. Lita's back, and she goes after Jazz. So that's kind of the story here is that, Jazz comes out to taunt Chyna, but it's Lita going after Jazz, and so that's kind of how we're playing it up here for that. Remember, too, Chyna going through the personal issues, so she's also getting the penalties in terms of these segment ratings. So not a lot to add here. Like I said, I do have a bigger plan for the women's division. It's just going to take a little bit to play out. So we're not there yet. 43 for this segment. All right. And now we're getting ready to go into our main event. And the whole thing here is that Vince, Angle, and Austin are walking towards the ring, and they're talking about, hey, Steve, we're going to go out here. We're going to handle this. And Austin says, of course. He says, of course you are, because I know Kurt Angle doesn't need any help to beat Kane for the Intercontinental Championship. So Austin's just having some fun here. And Angle just says, thank you, Steve. I agree. I don't need any help. I'm an Olympic gold medalist. I will beat Kane and become the Intercontinental Champion. So they're walking towards the ring, but all of a sudden, here come the Dudley Boys, Bubba and Devon. So they're walking up, and they start taunting both Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle. And so all of a sudden, we've got these four yapping at each other. And things are about to get ugly here as Vince calls over for the security and the officials, and he gets them between these four men because they're ready to have a little brouhaha here. Austin and Angle, the Dudley Boys. But afterwards, so Vince has broken this up. Angle, perhaps his focus affected a little bit. Vince just says, you know what, I'm going to solve this right now. And he tells security to throw the Dudley Boys out of the building. And, Vince is pleased with himself because he's like, we don't have any security breaches to worry about tonight. We got rid of that trash on SmackDown. So Vince tells security to throw out the Dudley Boys, and they do. They start to haul off them, but not everyone, because there's one security official here that Vince pulls aside and says, I want you to do this for me. He says, after this match coming up, I want you to let him in the building. Vince says, you know who I'm talking about. Let him in. As soon as the bell rings, let him in. So, who is Vince talking about? Perhaps we will find out, as he wants someone to be let in the building as soon as the bell rings for the main event. So, there you go. 78 for this one. All right, so we're going to get into the match. But I'm going to give you a little angle, of course, our in-match angles, as we like to do, to kind of give you more of a story of how this match unfolds. As it's Angle, as it's Kane, for the Intercontinental Championship. And so, Austin just stayed in the back. Kurt said he didn't need his help. Vince goes out to ringside with Kurt. That's kind of your story here. But things escalate to where, of course, Vince tries to get involved because, well, it's Vince McMahon, right? And so Vince tries to get involved. As you can see here, this only gets to 77. The Kane Angle idea, so we had a little creative energy here to work with. It said it was pretty much a safe bet. Well, as you can tell, not always a safe bet because this one was a failure, so it didn't work as well. But Vince tries to get involved, and what happens? Well, Kane chokeslams Vince McMahon. So Kane has chokeslam the owner of the company here, Vincent Kennedy McMahon. And so the crowd's going nuts because Angle's down, Vince has gotten chokeslammed, and here comes Steve Austin, right? Austin comes out, and of course, you've got shenanigans and all this other stuff. We can throw in a ref bump, whatever you want to throw in. It's the Attitude Era. Austin comes out, and he's not going to stand for this, right? And so Austin comes out, and he finds a way to haul off on Kane with a chair. Vince has been chokeslammed. He's down and out. Austin, is kind of, again, hauling off on Kane with a chair here. And then what Austin does is he picks up Kurt Angle, and he goes over and puts Kurt Angle on top of Kane in a 77 match, which was clearly not as good as we wanted it to be. Although we did use a creative finish here for this one too, because that was also a safe bet. This one came through. The other one did not. And it is Kurt Angle who gets the win over Kane to win the Intercontinental Championship. Pinfall, should not be submission. Again, I always forget to do it. I tell you guys that. And I also can tell that I put the wrong person in here. Initially, when I first booked this out, I was kind of having Big Show play a role here, but as you can tell, I kind of changed a few things with the Big Show on this show. So this, of course, should be Steve Austin. That's my mistake on that one. But we had Austin interfering. Angle has defeated Kane for the Intercontinental Championship. And so very disappointed with the match result. I'm not going to lie to you. 77 for this one. I just was not expecting this. I mean, an in-ring performance, 89 for Angle, 83 for Kane, but the lack of psychology on display. Match drifts a little bit. So everything we tried here, I was thinking this would be in the 80s. It was not. So this was not exactly a success that I wanted it to be. But the bigger story, of course, is that Austin has interfered to allow Angle to win the Intercontinental Championship. Vince has been chokeslammed by Kane. And so, remember what Vince said about let him in as soon as the bell rings after this match. No matter what, let him in. Well, get to a 79 here for this one. Here comes The Undertaker. So apparently this is the person that Vince said let in, because we know the whole theme has been that Vince has made sure that The Undertaker has been banned from the arena. Now he's gotten in, but of course that was the security breach, right? And Undertaker, here he comes. And so he's clearly the person that Vince said, hey, security, let him in as soon as the bell rings after the main event. So Taker comes out, and so he's coming out for blood here, right? He's coming out for Austin. He's coming out for Angle. But before Taker can get his hands on Stone Cold Steve Austin or Kurt Angle, as Angle is coming to here and celebrating with the Intercontinental title. Here comes Edge and Christian. So, Edge and Christian have made their way out, and they come out and they start to attack the Undertaker from behind. And so you have Edge and Christian attacking attacking Taker from behind. And so then you have Angle and Austin kind of joining on the beatdown here. So all of a sudden, it's 4-on-2. Austin, Angle, Edge, Christian, they're taking out Taker, they're taking out Kane. Vince is kind of, yelling orders, and you can tell Vince is still pissed off because he's finally come to after the chokeslam, and he's just telling these guys to beat the hell out of Taker and Kane. So they're doing that here. They beat them down, and so these guys are standing tall. Of course, there's no Jericho in the building to make the save. There's no Dudley boys even potentially in the building to make the save. And so that's kind of your story here. The numbers game. Edge and Christian. Angle said earlier he had a favor to ask them. Well, turns out potentially this is the favor. As Edge and Christian come out, they attack the Undertaker, and that is how we kind of have this thing standing here with Kurt Angle holding the Intercontinental Championship. Austin just kind of looking over at Angle, who's put his other championship now on the other shoulder. Both men have 2 titles on their shoulders, and Edge and Christian are kind of celebrating with Angle. So Vince standing with all of these guys, right? 79 for the segment. However, the celebration is cut short because we see on the screen a face that we have not seen. We've heard him talked about, but we've not seen him yet in our series. And on the screen appears Shane McMahon. So Shane O'Mac, who's of course led this invasion, Booker T and DDP. Shane is in control of WCW. And Shane McMahon appears on the screen, and Vince and Angle and Austin, all of a sudden, their excitement turns to frustration here as they're looking at the screen and they see Shane McMahon. But, and I forgot to put these guys in there. Again, guys, remember, I was behind on the booking. I actually did this show initially, but the save corrupted, and I went back and was like, I'm going to forget some stuff, and I did. Shane is standing there, and on each side of him, there is Booker T and there is DDP. So Shane is standing in this undisclosed location. And Shane just says, "Hey, Dad." And he says, "I see you picked up another championship there. Congratulations, Kurt. You guys seem to be in a real good mood. And that's good. Because I know you haven't exactly been in the best of moods," Shane says, because, well, these 2 guys right here, Booker T, DDP, 2 of the best that WCW has to offer. And Shane says, "So, you guys are standing out there with 4 championships now combined on your shoulder. And let me tell you, my guys are looking to face the best of the best. And it looks like that's you 2. Steve, Kurt, looks like you're now the best of the best." And Shane says, "So, when are we going to do this? When are you 2 going to give my 2 guys an opportunity to face the best? Because that's what you are, right? You're the best." And Shane just says, "So I just wanted to pop in here. Sorry to ruin your celebration, but I just wanted to pop in and say, we're ready. Anytime, any place, anywhere. My 2 guys are ready to face your guys, Dad. So just let me know when you're ready to have the match." And so Vince is, kind of fuming, and Austin and Angle are looking over at each other, and they're just kind of talking amongst themselves, and you can tell that they think that's it. But then Shane says, "Oh, wait a second, actually, there's one more thing. Dad, congratulations to you as well on getting rid of Eric Bischoff. Because, as you said, trust is everything. But you also said something that I thought was pretty interesting. Facts over emotions, Dad. It's all about the facts, right? Well, let's just say that I think you let your emotions get in the way of the facts on SmackDown when you revealed to the world that Eric Bischoff was the person who caused your big security breach that allowed The Undertaker, Kane, Chris Jericho, and of course my guys, Booker T and DDP, to get into the building. Turns out, Dad, it wasn't Eric Bischoff who caused your security breach, Dad. It was me. Because what you have to remember, I may be the person in charge of WCW, but I've been in the WWF for many, many years. And you never know who on your security team, in the back, or maybe even in the ring right now, has their allegiance to me and not you. And so, I just wanted to make sure you knew that, Dad. Thanks for taking out Eric, though, because now that's one piece out of the way as WCW is declaring war on you, the WWF. So, Shane with the big reveal, and of course Vince is losing his mind here. He's going wild. He realizes what they've done. They've just taken out Eric Bischoff, who seemingly was not the person responsible for all these security breaches. It was Shane McMahon playing on Vince's very volatile emotions and pulling one over on his dad. And so Shane reveals that he was the person who pulled the strings, and now Vince and Austin have taken out Eric Bischoff, seemingly for no reason. But perhaps the bigger story, there is an official challenge laid down. Shane wants his two guys, Booker T and DDP, to have an opportunity against the best. And that is how we end this edition of Raw is War 87 for this segment. And we go off the air with an 80. Good stuff. We'll take that. We did get kind of the disappointment here. The storyline's not further on the show. None had dramatic stakes. So I got to really change up the storylines a little bit. It's just something else, as I always say, I just have not done consistently. So I need to change that a little bit to make that better. But for now, we'll take this 80. It's fine. Big developments on the show. Yeah. All right, let's see what we get to before we finish up this particular show. Financial report made $669,000. My goodness. We're a machine. Popularity recap kind of stays the same everywhere. It goes up a little bit elsewhere. That's about it. All right, let's see what else we need to get to before we wrap up. All right, so Raw, it looks like Austin had a catchphrase. Raw had a positive show, it's not striking gold, but Austin came up with a new catchphrase. I guess I missed that on one of the notes, but entirely improvised, so of course, Stone Cold. Fans were heard chanting it after the show ended, indicating that maybe one of those phrases that resonates deeply with the fan base. Did we not just have that on the previous show, now that I remember it? Did we not have one of those too with the whole Bischoff segment? Everybody was, in the comments we were talking about what was Austin saying to Bischoff. He's done it again. This man is just magical. So Stone Cold has another catchphrase. So we've already probably gotten what in there. We've got something else with Austin here. So name your next catchphrase, perhaps in the comments. All right, so Raw gets a 6.44. I want to keep this one on there. So Bradshaw is building a clique. I did keep this from one of the notes last time around. So a clique building with the Good Father and Teddy Long. So that makes sense. I kind of like that one. So there you have it. Of course, we said Rhino still the grueling schedule for him, but I can't give the Rhino a day off right now. He's got too much going on. So there you go. That was Raw is War. Pretty noteworthy show again. Kurt Angle has become the Intercontinental Champion. Shane McMahon has laid down the gauntlet for a tag team match while also revealing that he may have manipulated the whole thing with Vince and Eric Bischoff. And so lots of stuff going on as we head into SmackDown, and which will be another very noteworthy show. I will say that. And then, as we said, the King of the Ring quarterfinals start next week on Raw is War. So two big things already building up for the next couple episodes on that. So appreciate you guys watching. As always, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button as well. As mentioned in the previous video, we're going to start a new TW9 series on the channel here soon. There were way more than I expected. I really appreciate you guys weighing in on that. Lots of suggestions as to what you guys want to see. There are a couple front runners right now, and as usual, we will probably get to multiple new saves, but we'll kind of try to go in some type of order that makes sense. But yeah, I appreciate all the feedback because there's just a lot of fun options with this, and excited to kind of keep the Invasion storyline going, but at the same time add something new to where maybe this is more the flagship thing on the channel right now, but always liked having multiple saves for you guys to have some variety there. So appreciate your feedback, and on the next episode of our WWF Invasion 2001 save, it will be yet another interesting edition of SmackDown.